Hello, everybody. Welcome to today, Wednesday, November 5th, 2025, where we celebrate the 31st Wednesday in Ordinary Time. And I want to touch up on the first reading because one of the biggest core themes as to how we live our life is through the process of love. So if we pay attention to the first reading according to the Romans, notice how Romans state that all of us here owe nothing to one another except to love. And so, what does it truly mean to love? Well, God gives us the 10 Commandments, and if we reflect upon the 4th commandment all the way to the 10th commandment, we know exactly how to love. So what are these last 7 commandments to which Jesus had for each and every one of us? To honor our parents and to do all sorts of things to love one another. So when we continue to keep God's commandments, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is why we are doing things in the first place. So each and every one of us here are reminded of the love to which God has given to each and every one of us. So these commandments to which we learn in our day-to-day lives helps us to be able to continue to establish the love to which God has given to each and every one of us here. And so, with that being said, let's move on to today's Holy Gospel as this continues to emphasize about the core theme of love. So, Jesus reminds each and every one of us here about how to become his disciple. And so, what does Jesus tell us about becoming a disciple? In order to become his disciple, we have to hate our fathers, hate our mothers, hate those that are around us. Here, Jesus does not refer to hate as wishing evil over one another. But it comes into question, why is it that Jesus is calling us to hate our fathers, hate our mothers, and stuff like that? And the commandment says to love our mothers and fathers. Well, here, Jesus does not imply to hate our mother and father. But we have to take into consideration how often we continue to love God. How often do we prioritize God in our lives? Because here is where the distinction comes in. Do we love God more or do we love our parents more? So all of us here should strive to continue to love God above all things. Because God has provided everything for each and every one of us here. And so we should be grateful for how much God has granted amongst each and every one of us here. So yes, we should continue to love our parents. But we should not let our parents take priority of a God. So God inspires each and every one of us here to love him. For the first of the greatest commandments says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. That indicates to each and every one of us here that we should love him to the fullest. And then it comes the second commandment, which is loving our neighbors as ourselves. Because to fully love God, we have to love our neighbors. So here, we can conclude that we have to love God first. And how else does Jesus call each and every one of us here to become disciples? In today's Holy Gospel, he had mentioned to carry the cross. Here, we know how heavy the cross is. And if we refer back to the time when Jesus carried the cross, it was very, very heavy. And in addition to carrying the cross, like there are various amounts of people who scourge Jesus, trying to get him to fall down as he continued to journey towards Gethsemane, where he was going to be dying. But despite how Jesus failed, he got back up again and continued to carry the cross. Here, the cross is a symbol for sacrifice. What does it mean to sacrifice for one another? Here, we give our lives to God. So to sacrifice things, we must sacrifice all of the things to which we have for our personal selves. So Jesus calls each and every one of us to sacrifice our time spent with parents, our time spent using our possessions to which we love the most. We sacrifice all of these wonderful aspects in our lives to turn and offer it up towards the Lord. This is the big calling to which Jesus has for each and every one of us, to be able to offer ourselves up towards Christ, because that in and of itself is what journey and path to which Jesus wants each and every one of us to follow through. And so, to really sacrifice, we have to really dedicate the time to the Lord. Now, how often should we dedicate our time towards the Lord so that we can allow the Lord to help work through each and every one of us? Jesus does not call each and every one of us here to dedicate 24 hours to Him. He does not call each and every one of us here to dedicate 1 hour to Him. He just wants each and every one of us to spend some time with Him. At least a minute or a little bit more. But it has to be a fruitful minute where we completely look and focus our attention towards the Lord and allow the Lord to be able to speak to each and every one of us here as we continue to understand how much God continues to love each and every one of us here. And so, to continue on with today's Holy Gospel, we also reflect upon the possession aspect of it, like I have mentioned. Why does Jesus mention giving up possessions? Because here's the thing. When we have, let's say, this new car, for example, we love our car so much to the point where we want to take care of the car. But then, as I continue to drive this car a lot more, the mileage is going to go up. Problems are going to continue to arise. Like the more I continue to drive. Why is that? Because I am exposing the car to the road a lot as I continue to drive from one place to another. And so what do I have to do? Fix the car. But here, Jesus reminds each and every one of us here not to focus too much of our attention to our possessions, but rather we should focus on Jesus Himself as He provides everything for each and every one of us. We should not have to worry so much on what we have. We should focus upon what we need from God, and that is His love. That is the message, biggest message to which Jesus has sent to each and every one of us. Because in today's Holy Gospel, Jesus gives us an imagery to which all of us here can derive a lesson from. So let's look at the imagery to which Jesus has given to each and every one of us. So the first imagery of which is building and calculating the cost. Because once we start to build a project, we need to have all of these allocated resources in order for each and every one of us to finish what we need to build. And if you don't have enough resources, you cannot build the building to its fullest, because You need to have all of the crucial elements, like for the house. You need to have foundation. You need to have all of these materials in order for the house to become stabilized over a period of time. In case there's bad weather that arises and the house is able to stay standing for a long period of time. So we need to have the resources. And another example, the troops, where the king has 10,000 troops. He wouldn't just send 10,000 troops to just fight in a battle unless he calculates what the enemy has set for him. And so, if he knew ahead of time, then the king would have asked for peace. And so, what does Jesus remind each and every one of us based on these two imageries to which I have presented here? Jesus reminds each and every one of us here to prepare ourselves. To prepare ourselves, we have to be able to give up the possessions to which we have. We don't need to give it up completely, but we should not focus too much of our attention on what we have, but we have to focus on what we need, and that is we need God to help guide each and every one of us. That's what is being implied of getting the resources, because the resources is God's love. And to be able to successfully win against the other side, we need to think about what God has set for each and every one of us. That is what God wants each and every one of us here to recall over a period of time as we continue to journey throughout our faith. So let us reflect upon these words to which Jesus has for each and every one of us here as we strive to continue to live forth our faith. Because here, Jesus is calling us to love. He does not call each and every one of us to hate. Because hate is a very, very strong word. And if we remember from yesterday and earlier today in my reflection, we noticed that hate is a form of evil. Jesus does not want us to be evil, but rather, Jesus wants to be a loving and generous person. So, as we continue to live forth our life, let us ask ourselves, how often do we allow ourselves to love Christ? Are there any obstacles in our life that prevent us from loving Christ? And if so, get rid of it. Get rid of the obstacles. Go through the obstacles in order for us to be able to draw a closer relationship with Christ.